Hello and welcome to the Chinksey Sports Presents, the Premier League show. We are back again for episode 25, having just hit another milestone. We appreciate all of you for the traction you're bringing this channel, be it likes, comments, shares, and subscriptions, and long may it continue. We have plenty of new content in the offing and brand new shows soon to be coming your way. And without any further ado, we go straight into the first match of last weekend, which feels like a lifetime ago now. That was at Goodison Park between Everton and Tottenham Hotspur this time last week. That game ended 2 apiece, 2-2. Everton's injury time equaliser denied Spurs the opportunity to go level on points with both Arsenal and Manchester City, who at that point were only 3 points in front of them. It also denied me a correct score. Spurs took the lead when Destiny Udogie got to the byline to square it for informed Spurs striker Richarlison, who's hotter than a Spur right now. For those electricians out there, you'll get that. For his first time, left-footed volley went straight into the top corner postage stamp. Just seconds after the Brazilian ran off to celebrate, he remembered that he was at Goodison Park, his former stomping ground. So stopped short of celebrating out of respect for his former side. Everton then took a leaf out of Manchester City's book and clearly earmarked Guillermo Vicario as a weak link from corners. Jack Harrison leant on the goalkeeper as Dwight McNeil curled in an invited in-swinger for the former City midfielder Harrison to prod home from close range. 1-1 at this stage. Spurs, with their lofty Champions League football ambitions, can simply not be giving up such goals at this level. Richarlison's second goal for his brace came from a James Maddison layoff. It was quite similar to his first goal, but this time had very little backlift. It seemed as though Spurs were going to hold out for a hard-fought victory, but for Jared Brentford, who clearly had other ideas, Spurs' deficiencies from set pieces were clearly there for all to see. Everton's equaliser came from a free kick into the box, which found its way into Brentford's path at the far post for him to head home and secure his side a much-needed point. The 6'5", 21-year-old was bought by Everton from Carlisle 4 years ago and loaned out to the likes of Blackburn Rovers and PSV Eindhoven in Holland, respectively, over the last few seasons. Those loan experiences, especially the PSV one last season, have stood him in good stead for him to become a bona fide first choice defender in the Premier League for Everton, and he's playing this afternoon against Man City. So it is little wonder why he's been heavily linked with Arsenal. Okay, following that was the M23 derby, the so-called M23 derby between Brighton and Crystal Palace. That ended 4-1 to the Seagulls. Brighton ran out authoritative winners as they banished their midweek woes at Kenilworth Road with an emphatic home win over arch rivals Crystal Palace. This bad-blooded affair and rivalry spans almost 50 years, and there were already clashes between supporters coming into this match. The home side went 2 up from 2 almost identical headers from their Brighton through-and-through duo. Veteran captain Lewis Dunk, who's been at the club for over 2 decades, and youngster Jank Hinchelwood, who is from nearby Worthing in Sussex, and is an academy graduate. A minute later, Argentine teenager Facundo Buonanotte grabbed the third to compound Crystal Palace's woes. Palace clearly missing their crown jewel, Michael Olise. Roy Hodgson's decision to bring him on at half-time with his side trailing 3-0 was horrendous, as the forward lasted a measly 11 minutes before having to be replaced by Brazilian midfielder Matheus França. A front six of Will Hughes, Chris Richards, Jefferson Lerma, Jordan Ayew, Jean-Philippe Mateta, and Jeffrey Schlupp is not a Premier League front six, as it lacks quality, creativity, and goals. A goal from Mateta, ironically, and João Pedro meant the game ended 4-1, with Roy Hodgson's head well and truly on the chopping board. So it's a matter of time before Roy Hodgson's replaced. It's just a question of whether the Palace hierarchy feel that the situation at Selhurst Park is getting out of hand, and they might need a temporary manager to take the reins between now and the end of the season, because Roy Hodgson's contract up at the end of the season anyway. If that wasn't the case, I'm sure he would have been replaced by now. Okay, so the next game was at Turf Moor between Burnley and Fulham. This was my one and only correct score of that week. That ended 2-2. After João Paulinho and Rodrigo Moniz had put Fulham 2 up after just over 20 first half minutes, Vincent Kompany must have been fearing for the worst. Burnley, who incidentally had their last win against Fulham in December, went close and threatened through their talented teenager Wilson Odubert. The French youngster had impressed this season, so it's of little surprise to know that he is a PSG Youth Academy graduate. Vincent Kompany's vast list of contacts in France, Belgium, and England has enabled him to draft in the likes of Lorenz Assignon and substitute David Datro Fofana. The pair combined to half the deficit. Fofana was on hand again to bag a dramatic late injury time equaliser on his home debut. I was surprised to see him on the bench after his midweek exploits against Manchester City, coming off the bench to set up a goal, but perhaps he is lacking match sharpness. It will be interesting to see if he starts against Liverpool later on today. The team sheets came out 4 minutes ago, so I'll have a look after this podcast. A remarkable stat is that from the 13 points that the Clarets have picked up this season, 4 of which have came against Fulham. That is crazy. Okay, following that game was at St James's Park between Newcastle United and Luton Town, ended 4 apiece after a crazy first half of football, which saw Sean Longstaff open the scoring and put the Magpies in the lead, only for them to be pegged back. Then he put Newcastle back ahead 2-1 before Ross Barkley then equalised. So obviously Gabriel Osho got Luton's first goal. It looked like a potential coupon buster was on the cards, with the score poised at 2-2 at half-time. In the second half, it remained even Stevens until the hour mark, when Chiedozie Ogbene, playing as a right wing-back, turned on the afterburners and breezed past Dan Burn in what is perhaps the biggest height-speed mismatch you'll ever see. The winger was adjudged to have been felled by the former Fulham captain, and the referee pointed to the spot. Carlton Morris didn't pass up the opportunity of putting Luton ahead. With Luton now 3-2 up, Elijah Adebayo, the midweek hat-trick hero, added a 4th for Luton as they were on the brink of securing their most impressive result of the season, because most of their impressive results have been at Kenilworth Road. It's been remarkable seeing the vast improvement from Adebayo, as I remember him missing an open goal earlier on in the season against Tottenham, and it appears he's becoming more and more clinical as time goes on. Newcastle was staring down the barrel and facing a second ignominious defeat to Luton this season. However, Kieran Trippier captaining the side in place of club captain Jamal Lascelles, who's out of contract in the summer and doesn't start anyway, made it 4-3 with over 20 minutes remaining. Substitute Harvey Barnes, back from a lengthy layoff, subsequently struck for Newcastle to secure the comeback and grab what earlier looked an unlikely point. Luton Town, who would have taken a point beforehand, have now lost just once in the last 9 games in all competitions and are 6 games unbeaten in all competitions, which is remarkable for Rob Edwards' side, who take on Sheffield United, who took on Aston Villa last weekend in the 5:30 kickoff, and they lost 5-0 at home. With the scoreline reading 4-0 at halftime, you feared the worst for Sheffield United, quite remarkable considering that they were held to a draw away to the same side, Aston Villa, back in December last year. Just 2 minutes into the second half, Villa's Spanish left-back Alex Moreno became the 5th different scorer for the away side after John McGinn, Ollie Watkins, Leon Bailey and Yuri Tillemans had scored the opening 4 Villa goals. Sheffield United are rubbish and will be relegated. Luckily for them, they have 15 games to pick up the 2 points they need to avoid beating, if you like, Derby County's lowest ever Premier League's points tally of 11. So Sheffield United basically have 10 points as we speak, and they just need a single win or 2 draws to ensure that they are not statistically the Premier League's worst ever side. Okay, the first of many Sunday fixtures was at Old Trafford in the game between Manchester United and West Ham United. It ended 3-0 to the Red Devils. Manchester United took West Ham to the slaughterhouse with a resounding 3-0 home victory over a wasteful West Ham side whose winless run now stretches to 5 games. Goals from Rasmus Højlund and a brace from Argentine wonderkid Alejandro Garnacho, who twice mocked Ghanaian winger Mohamed Kudus' trademark celebration where he sits on the advertising boards after scoring. That win was Manchester United's 3rd consecutive in all competitions, and it's safe to say that the final scoreline did not reflect the game state, as West Ham had more shots on and off target, more corners and just as much possession as Manchester United, but contrived to lose 3-0. The irony being is Arsenal's stats were similar against West Ham, yet West Ham won 2-0 at the Emirates in December. The last game that they've won, mind you. The 2 face off again tomorrow. That's West Ham and Arsenal. Okay, 2 o'clock kickoff between Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest ended 1 apiece. Last week I spoke about Bournemouth beating all the also-rans, but I suspected that this game would be a draw. My prediction was 2-2, but I felt with Anthony Elanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi both well rested for this game, Forest were more than capable of causing Bournemouth problems, especially on the break. And that so proved to be the case. After Justin Kluivert had put the Cherries 1-0 up, after just 5 minutes, it looked as though Bournemouth would run away with the result, but Forest managed to stem the tide and hung in there. As halftime drew closer and closer, Forest began to dominate Bournemouth and created numerous chances. Ryan Yates went close on a few occasions, but the former Chelsea winger Hudson-Odoi cut in from the left wing to slam it beyond the Bournemouth keeper Neto, a captain as well. In the second half, which proved to be a stalemate, referee Rebecca Welch sent off substitute Philip Billing, who has endured a frustrating season this year, coming off the bench a lot of times and been dropped for Justin Kluivert after his cynical trip on Hudson-Odoi. It could be portrayed as harsh, but you could see why she gave the straight red, because it was simply dangerous play. Another game that kicked off at 2 o'clock was at Stamford Bridge between Chelsea and Wolverhampton Wanderers. It ended 4-2 to Wolves. After Cole Palmer opened the scoring for Maurizio Pochettino's side, you would have been forgiven for thinking that Wolves are heading for their 2nd straight defeat in 4 days, after their long unbeaten run came to a head against Manchester United on Thursday night. However, this match was about one man, and that one man was the hat-trick hero, Matheus Cunha. His first goal deflected fortuitously off Thiago Silva to equalise for his side. Similarly, Ryan Ait-Nouri's shot after a pass from Pedro Neto was this time deflected off of Axel Disasi, the French defender, as Wolves went into the break 2-1 up. Wolves were baying for blood and hungry, clearly. First, Pedro Neto outpaced Ben Chilwell to square for Cunha to score his second, before the man of the moment outpaced Chelsea right-back Malo Gusto, whose clumsy challenge gave away a penalty, and you can guess what happened next. Cunha scored the penalty. With the scores at 4-1 to the away side, a late consolation goal from Thiago Silva did little to quell the overall feelings of dismay from the home supporters. Wolves thus completed their first double over Chelsea since the mid-70s, securing their third victory in a row against Chelsea in the process, in what is by far, or was by far, Wolves' most impressive result and performance of the season. So, coming up to the big game of that weekend was between Arsenal and Liverpool. In Arsenal's most impressive result and performance of the season, Arsenal came and emerged victorious 3-1. Arsenal's first goal came after superb play, intricate passing and movement involving Jorginho, Martin Odegaard and the much maligned Alexander Zinchenko cut open the Liverpool defence, resulting in Kai Havertz's parried shot landing right into Bukayo Saka's path to open the scoring for the home side. Arsenal were fantastic in that first half and largely, if not totally, stymied Liverpool's lethal attack. So much so that they didn't have a shot in anger, not a shot on target throughout the entire first half. Stifled. The manner of Liverpool's equaliser came in bizarre circumstances. After Ryan Gravenberch's hopeful ball towards Luis Diaz left the Colombian in a wrestling match with William Saliba, who tried to shepherd the ball out of play. However, with Arsenal goalkeeper David Raya too far from the ball, but too far off his line, Diaz managed to swing his left foot around Saliba and connect with the ball, which ricocheted off of Gabriel Magalhaes' arm and into the back of the net. Liverpool went into the break on level terms with Arsenal, just as they did in January, when Arsenal played even better in that first half. In the second half, it was in almost identical fashion, this time involving Virgil van Dijk, Gabriel Martinelli and Alisson Becker. Gabriel Magalhaes played a long ball towards Martinelli, which looked like Van Dijk had under control, but once he allowed the ball to bounce, uncertainty began to creep in. A well-timed shoulder barge from Martinelli when Van Dijk was off balance, and with Alisson's momentum already taking him past both players, meant that the ball dropped perfectly for Martinelli to tap into an empty, unguarded net. Perhaps Alisson got caught up in Wonderland, or should I say, no man's land. Mic drop. With Ibrahima Konate already on a yellow card, Kai Havertz sold him a dummy and gave the referee no option but to issue him with a second yellow card. So now with Liverpool down to 10 men and trailing 2-1 with just 2 minutes of normal time remaining. Jurgen Klopp's side, operating without a recognised right back, were punished 4 minutes later after Leandro Trossard ran through on goal and placed the ball between Alisson's legs to clinch the game, set and match for the Gunners, who have now gone 4 league games unbeaten against Liverpool, 2 seasons, 2 draws and 2 wins. Arsenal gained a morale-boosting win over their title rivals, who succumbed to just their second league defeat of the season, both of which have been in North London incidentally, as they also lost to Tottenham in September, albeit in contentious circumstances. Okay, so now we head to the last fixture of last week's game week, which was at the GTEC Stadium between Brentford and Manchester City, ended 3-1 to the away side, City, after Dutch goalkeeper Mark Fleckens' long ball found its way to everyone's pantomime villain, Brentford's informed striker, Neil Maupay. The Bees took an early lead after just 21 minutes with which took City aback. You just felt though that be it Brentford may have scored too early, they needed to get to half time with their lead still intact. They almost did though, to their credit, but for a poor header from Jamaica international Ethan Pinnock, which allowed Phil Foden to equalise in the 3rd minute of added time in the first half. Brutal. In the second half, Foden grabbed himself another 2 goals. The first, a header from a Kevin De Bruyne cross, and the second displayed great touch, acceleration and composure in front of goal from the 23-year-old midfielder who's currently on top of his game. In this form, England manager Gareth Southgate is going to have to find a way to assimilate him into the starting 11. You perhaps feel that the only ways to do so is to either play him in a midfield 3, alongside Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham, or on the left of a front 3 alongside Bukayo Saka and Harry Kane, because in this form he is simply unstoppable and therefore undroppable. Okay, so those were last week's fixtures. And last week was a goal frenzy with 45 goals across the 10 games. I'm not Carol Vorderman, so I won't do the averages, but I'm guessing it's around 3 or 4 goals a game. I don't think it will be realistic to expect as many goals this week, though. But we have some eye-catching fixtures such as West Ham Arsenal, Villa United, Spurs Brighton, and I think Luton v Sheffield United will be intriguing in a different way. As perhaps for the first time this season, pressure and expectation will be on the Hatters to deliver against a side that are all but doomed and resigned to a resignation from the Premier League relegation. Last week I got 1 correct score and 7 correct results. The incorrect ones being Everton drawing with Spurs. That was from a last minute equaliser. Luton drawing with Newcastle, which was a coupon buster. And Chelsea's embarrassing shock home defeat to Wolverhampton Wanderers. The first fixture of the weekend, though, is at the Etihad in the game between... That's the game that is currently kicked off between Manchester City and Everton. Man City have an opportunity to protrude Liverpool into top spot by securing a routine home win against an Everton side struggling for results and form of recent. I've just seen their starting 11 and they have rested Kevin De Bruyne, Kyle Walker, Bernardo Silva and Josko Gvardiol, with manager Pep Guardiola clearly prioritising in anticipation of a tough week of fixtures against FC Copenhagen in the Champions League and Chelsea in the league next weekend. City, who have won their last 9 in all competitions and 5 on the bounce in the league, will not want to pass up this opportunity given that Liverpool play Burnley at 3 o'clock today in a game that you'd expect Liverpool to win comfortably. The fact that Everton boss Sean Dyche has questioned why his club are facing the prospect of a 2 points deduction this season before Manchester City have responded, or should I say have even responded to the 115 charges, could potentially add spice to this game, but will not stop Manchester City adding to their 12 wins from 13 against Everton in all competitions, against a side whom they haven't lost to for all of 7 years. So my prediction is 3-0 to Manchester City. Okay, following that is the 3 o'clock kickoff between Wolves and Burnley. Wolves come into this game after their morale-boosting heroics at Stamford Bridge after the 4-2 win there, in their best performance of the season so far, after a disappointing home performance and defeat to Manchester United. Manager Gary O'Neill is definitely amongst the front runners for the manager of the season. He won't win it though. Brentford are in the midst of a horrendously tough run of fixtures, and while you could argue that this is their most winnable from the batch, I suspect that Thomas Frank would bite your hand off if you're offering him a point now, as it halts their poor recent run of 2 defeats and a bounce, having took the lead in both matches against Tottenham and Man City. These two sides have already faced off 3 times in the last 7 matches, with Wolves emerging victorious on 2 occasions with a draw on the other. Brentford's Ivan Toney will be looking to get back amongst the goals, but Wolves have Hwang back in their squad after South Korea's disappointing defeat to Jordan in the Asian Cup semi-finals. Brentford are fighting for their lives, perilously poised just 3 points above the drop zone. In fact, if Brentford lose and Everton, Luton and Nottingham Forest all win, the Bees will end the weekend in the dreaded drop zone, with their next 2 fixtures being against the current top 2, Liverpool and Manchester City. I think it's going to be a hard-fought, competitive game that Wolves will just edge 2-1. Okay, following that is a game I am looking forward to between Tottenham and Brighton Hove Albion. Everton. Yeah, so between Tottenham and Brighton Hove Albion, with Brazilian Richarlison on top of his game with 9 goals in his last 10 games in all competitions. I expect him to get on the score sheet. Since these two last met, Spurs have had 2 wins against Bournemouth and Brentford and 2 draws against Manchester United and Everton. However, they should have their best 11 now all fit and raring to go, with the likes of Heung-min Son, Yves Bissouma and Pape Matar back from international duty to supplement the likes of James Maddison in midfield. Brighton, on the other hand, flushed out and banished their midweek misfortune against Luton with a rampant response against arch rivals Crystal Palace. Those 2 results exemplify Brighton's topsy-turvy run of form, but while they have only lost 6 league games all season, they have drawn an awful lot of games with a league high of 8. I think this makes for an exciting game of football, which I think Spurs will win 3-1. Okay, another quite exciting game, well, it looks like, is between Fulham and Bournemouth. Fulham come into this game on the back of just 1 win in 7 Premier League games. Remarkably, that win came against title-chasing Arsenal. Bournemouth, I feel, will fancy their chances of ending the season in the top 10. That should be their aim from here on in, as Fulham did last season, and I wouldn't put it past them. Given their recent form, I believe they should go into this game as favourites. That's Bournemouth, that is. You could argue that both sides are on the beach, but with Luton frequently picking up points, a few bad results could leave one or both of these sides looking over their shoulders. Despite Fulham missing their Nigerian pair, Alex Iwobi and Calvin Bassey, who will be contesting the AFCON final tomorrow against Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, I think there will be goals aplenty in this one, and I'm going for a 2-2 draw. Okay, following that is another 3 o'clock kickoff at Anfield. There's been a lot of talk about Liverpool recent, whether it be about their quest for an unprecedented, unofficial quadruple, Jurgen Klopp leaving, or their non-performance against Arsenal on Sunday. Expect a backlash. Liverpool will almost certainly be second by the time they kick off in this game, because Manchester City will almost certainly beat Everton at home. I'm 99% sure of that. 2 of Vincent Kompany's 3 league wins have come up against fellow promoted sides in Burnley, in Sheffield United, who are the only team that is below them in 20th, and Luton Town, who are 17th, just 2 places above them. They have grown used to losing 13 out of their last 18 games in all competitions, And as they say, losing can become an unwanted habit. They faced the daunting proposition of travelling to Anfield after Liverpool's woeful display last week, and I'll be dumbfounded if the Reds don't score at least 3 goals. So my prediction here is a comprehensive 3-0 Liverpool home win. Another interesting game is between Luton Town and Sheffield United. With every passing week, Luton are looking more and more likely to stay up, but my prediction was for them to go down, and I'm going to stick to my guns on that one and not budge. But what Rob Edwards' side have done is give themselves a puncher's chance of picking up points in every single game, and as a result of staying in the division. Their regular accumulation of points has also dragged the likes of Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest, Brentford and Everton into the mix, with the likes of Wolves, Fulham and Bournemouth looking over their shoulders too. As we're now at the stage of saying you wouldn't be surprised if any of those 8 sides, including Luton, picked up wins, whereas it's safe to say that Burnley and Sheffield United are as good as gone. So my prediction for this game is 3-1 to the informed Hatters, Luton Town. Right, following that is the game between Nottingham Forest and Newcastle United. Forest have, after their initial new manager bounce, found wins hard to come by, with Nuno Espirito Santo winning 2 of his opening 3 games, which were against Newcastle and Manchester United in December. They have not won since, incidentally, after disappointing defeats to Brentford and Arsenal and the draw with Bournemouth. Newcastle, who have won 10 games and lost 10 games, will be looking to salvage their season. European football will provide some form of redemption in what has ultimately proved to have been a disappointing season so far for them. They are currently lying in 9th place and will want to stay in touch with Manchester United, who are 5 points ahead of them and currently occupy 6th position. The way I see the league table at the moment is the top 3 are title contenders. The 3 below that, 4th to 6th, are battling for top 4. The 5 below that, so that will be 7th to 11th, are battling for any form of European football. Bournemouth and Fulham will be looking to sneak into the top 10, whereas the rest are fighting to stave off relegation. Forest are one of 4 teams who, if results don't go their way, could occupy one of the bottom 3 positions. It's a game that neither could afford to lose in their pursuits of their respective endeavours, and as a result, I think they'll cancel each other out, and I think it's going to be a draw. I've gone for a 2-2. Right, tomorrow's game between West Ham United and Arsenal. I've dubbed it the Declan Rice Derby. Arsenal's former Hammers captain has been exceptional in 90% of games for Arsenal this season. However, 2 of his not so good performances have both came in defeats to the Hammers, who you could argue are now Arsenal's bogey team. You could argue that in the first fixture in the Carabao Cup, he was brought on with his side already 3-0 down and out. But in the second game, David Moyes' side did a job on Arsenal tactically, and Rice gave away a last-minute penalty, which his mate Sayed Benrahma, now on loan at Lyon, missed to prevent a 3-0 win. Clearly, the boos he's been getting and the affection he has for the football club, West Ham, is affecting him mentally and subsequently making his performances dip. From Arsenal's perspective, he'll need to cut that out, as the London Stadium will be a cauldron on Sunday. He'll get booed. Arsenal can't be lulled into taking 7th placed West Ham lightly, even though they're winless in 5, because anything but a win will suffice. Prior to this season, West Ham hadn't beaten Arsenal in 8 games, and David Moyes had never even registered an away win against Arsenal, whether it be during his tenure as manager at Everton, Sunderland, Manchester United or West Ham. When he was at Real Sociedad, he didn't play Arsenal. Now they'll be chasing their third straight victory and fourth game unbeaten against Mikel Arteta's men, who must win to stay in touch of the top two, as quite frankly, will do so. I think Arsenal since the winter break have looked reinvigorated and revitalised, and I'm backing them to emerge victorious and banish the woes of previous games against the Hammers. I've gone for a 2-1 win to Arsenal. The next one for me is the game of the weekend, I think, between Aston Villa and Manchester United. Had Aston Villa's recent form not been 2 wins from 6 league games, and both of those wins were against the bottom two, ordinarily you would have probably made Aston Villa favourites. However, I believe that with the head of steam that Manchester United have built up of recent, I make this 50-50 game. Could go either way. Villa's omnipotent home record has been breached in recent times after their midweek FA Cup replay defeat to Chelsea and losing their previous home league game to Newcastle, which has seen Villa lose their last 2 home games on the spin. If Villa lose this one too, 6th place Manchester United would close the gap on them to just 5 points, and 5th place Spurs could leapfrog them into the top 4. Not long ago, people were touting Villa as potential title challengers, and now they could potentially be battling to stay in the top 6, all encompassing a top 6 finish for Villa would have been the target prior to the season start and deemed a very good season. A top 5 finish would be a great season. Manchester United, on the other hand, despite winning their last 3 in all competitions and being unbeaten in 5, are some way off the pace in their quest to secure Champions League football next season. If they are to retain any slim hopes of that, then an away win is paramount, and it's a possibility, but I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw. I've gone for a lot of draws this week. Right, for the last game of the weekend, which is on a Monday night, under the lights at Selhurst Park between Crystal Palace and Chelsea. For Crystal Palace and the powers that be at the football club, a home defeat to Chelsea could prove to be the straw that broke the camel's back and the final nail in the coffin for Roy Hodgson. This time last season, when Palace were toiling and struggling for results, they quickly pulled the trigger on Patrick Vieira and drafted in Roy Hodgson faster than a barmaid. Chelsea's young team, spearheaded by Cole Palmer, who's been hands down their best player this season, have been struggling for results and inconsistent all season. Palace lie a mere 5 points above the drop zone, have the 3rd worst goal difference in the league after the bottom 2. Scary stuff. They are also certain to be without Michael Olise, who was heavily linked with Chelsea in the summer, as he has a hamstring strain, and unlikely to be without Ebere Eze and key defender Mark Guehi, who also suffered injuries against Brighton. The Palace crowd are usually a raucous bunch under the lights, and despite the discontent amongst the Eagles faithful, I expect no different on Monday. I think it will be a tight affair in which Chelsea will huff and puff, but eventually blow the house down with a 2-1 away win. Wow. So that's that for this weekend. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next week. Bow.